Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to share with you a story today from Liza Long. A year ago, Liza wrote about the difficulty she faces raising a son who suffers from serious mental illness. I live with a son who is mentally ill. I love my son, but he terrifies me, she said. A few weeks ago, Michael pulled a knife and threatened to kill me and then himself after I asked him to return his overdue library books. His 7- and 9-year-old siblings knew the safety plan. They ran to the car and locked the doors before I even asked them to. I managed to get the knife from Michael, then methodically collected all the sharp objects in the house into a single Tupperware container that now travels with me. Through it all, he continued to scream insults at me and threatened to kill or hurt me. That conflict ended when 3 burly police officers and our paramedic wrestling my son into a gurney for an expensive ambulance ride to the local emergency room. The mental hospital didn't have any beds that day, and Michael calmed down nicely in the ER, so they sent us home with a prescription for Zyprexa and a follow-up visit with a local pediatric psychiatrist. This problem is too big for me to handle on my own. Sometimes there are no good options, so you just pray for grace and trust that in hindsight it will all make sense. I'm sharing this story because I am Adam Lanza's mother. I am Dylan Klebold's and Eric Harris's mother. I am James Holmes' mother. I am Jared Lochner's mother. These boys and their mothers need help. In the wake of another horrific national tragedy, it's easy to talk about guns, but it's time to talk about mental illness." End quote. Liza shared her story with my subcommittee last year at a forum of parents of children with severe mental illness. And after studying our nation's mental health system for the past year, as chairman of the Energy and Commerce Oversight Subcommittee, we discovered those families who need help the most are least likely to get it. And where there is no help, there is no hope. Federal programs meant to serve the severely mentally ill are failing. The federal government sets up barriers that make it increasingly difficult for mothers and fathers to care for a son or daughter coming of age who needs help for mental illness. Our current policies block or interfere with appropriate treatment. Funds are wasted on ineffective programs, and scientific standards are not used in determining where the money goes to for grants and treatments. Our current policies have replaced hospital beds with prison cells and homeless shelters as options for the seriously ill. That's wrong, and that's immoral. And that's why I introduced the Helping Families and Mental Health Crisis Act, H.R. 3717, to deliver care to those with severe mental illness who need better treatment, real treatment, not excuses and not delays. Today, Liza's son is doing better with the proper diagnosis and medical care. She wrote about where things stand with reforming mental health this week, 13 months after her initial letter, and discussed the Helping Families and Mental Health Crisis Act. She said, "Considering our limited resources, it just makes sense to help those who are most in need. That was the rationale behind Helping Families and Mental Health Crisis Act." And she continued to call for what's needed to help our seriously ill children. She wrote, "Access to medical care for the 11 million people who suffer from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or major depression. This bill seeks to accomplish this goal by empowering parents, increasing acute care beds, and promoting assisted outpatient treatment for as many as 50% of schizophrenia sufferers whose symptoms include anosognosia or lack of awareness of their illness. The bill also addresses the critical shortage of child psychiatrists, where there's only one for every 7,000 children in the U.S., with funds for telepsychiatry, and seeks to reform SAMHSA by redirecting funds for community-based care towards evidence-based programs. The Wall Street Journal praised the bill, noting that SAMHSA, the government agency charged with funding community mental health treatments, has little or no focus on medically driven care, and of its 537 full-time employees, only 2 are physicians." End quote. Over the past month, I've received an enormous outpouring of support from parents and caregivers of loved ones who have serious mental illness. They know this bill takes mental illness out of the shadows of ignorance, despair, neglect, and into the bright light of hope. Each week, I'll come before the House and share more stories like Liza's. I encourage my colleagues to join me in this endeavor by sponsoring the Helping Families and Mental Health Crisis Act, H.R. 3717, because where there is real help, there is real hope. I yield back.